I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our NMC virtual presentation. My name is Marilyn Cavaretta-Lutzel. I'm with the National Managers Community, and I'm welcoming you and bienvenue to notre présentation virtuelle for the National Managers Community hosted by the Ontario region. I'm absolutely thrilled today to be discussing mental health, burnout and recognition with our invited guest, Jennifer Carter. I'd like to acknowledge that I am situated on the traditional territories of many First Nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Wendat people, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee. I'm grateful to be able to work on these lands, and I'd like you all to take a moment to reflect on the lands in which you are currently situated. Please note, as this is a virtual event, our tech team will support as best we can, but sometimes panelists will come in and out of screen. And if that happens, please wait a moment for the system to recover. If you haven't already done so, please mute yourself and remove yourself from camera. As our event is being recorded, there will be a NMC YouTube video link that will be provided to all at days following the event. So, please note, la plupart de la discussion aujourd'hui se tiendra en anglais, mais soyez à l'aise d'utiliser votre langue de préférence si vous avez des questions. And we will be using the chat function to, if you have any questions, so please refer to the top right-hand corner of your screen to submit any questions. We will not be using the raised hand function for today. So with that, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome our Ontario NMC Regional Champion, Mauricette Howlett. The lovely Mauricette has always supported the NMC and contributed to all of our events. So thank you, Mauricette, for taking the time and joining us today.
Great, thanks very much, Marilyn. And, I'd like to welcome everyone to our virtual event hosted by the Ontario region. So good morning, and it is truly a pleasure to be joining everyone today. I understand that we have participants throughout the country joining us, and that is fantastic. It certainly is the benefit of being able to connect virtually. So we've broken down those borders and those barriers, and it allows us to broadcast our event across all of the regions. This is actually just one of many examples of how over the course of the year, the NMC has become very agile and quick in adapting to the changes that we faced as leaders in the public service, and able to quickly pivot to leverage the various social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, MS Teams like we're using today, and YouTube so that we can connect and engage. Virtual learning events are one of the many ways that the NMC connects to interdepartmental managers across the region. The NMC endeavors to be the voice of managers, so we are your voice. Our aim is to connect with you, and to connect you to peers and senior leaders and better support you through these learning opportunities. We hope that today's session on burnout recognition, recovery, and self-care tips will sustain your own mental health and in turn help you to reinforce the mental health of your employees and teams. And just as we get started, I just want to share a bit of a personal story, because certainly mental health has impacted me personally throughout my life. I had a parent who suffered from significant mental health issues, and have to say, as a kid, had absolutely no idea what it was or what it was about. And so for years, my brothers and I would describe my mom as having her dark days. So these were days where literally she could not get out of bed and would basically spend the day asleep. But bless her heart, she still managed to go to work. She was a nurse, so she would get up around 3 o'clock and go off to her shift at the hospital from 4 to midnight, and then come back home and then sleep. And as kids, that meant we sort of had to, fend for ourselves in terms of getting ready, getting off to school, that sort of thing. But we had no idea what it was, and it had its peaks and its valleys. So there were times where she'd absolutely be so energetic. It was sort of off the chart. And then there were these really dark days, and we would just kind of get home and go, oh, it's a dark day, and move on. And it wasn't, and then there'd be no Christmas sometimes. Some years there was no Christmas, no birthday parties, no Thanksgiving, because they were the dark periods. And, my dad did the best he can, but sort of back then, and being a bit more traditional, he let things, a lot to my mom. Anyway, fast forward to getting into the workplace and working for the federal government. And I remember I was probably with Health Canada at the time, and we were starting to have that dialogue about mental health in the workplace. And it was like being hit by a lightning bolt when we had a session talking about depression, and they were describing manic depression. And there it was, an explanation and actually a description of exactly what we had experienced with my mom. And it was, she was textbook. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that's what this is. It wasn't just sort of bad days. It was manic depression. And I remember actually feeling so sad too, because it had gone on for so many years without being diagnosed. I think because in particular the stigma, and which is something I know that we've all worked very, very hard to address now. And how amazing that as a federal government, we've made it very clear that mental health and wellness matters, and we've made great strides in the workplace to ensure that people are aware of the resources that are available to them, and how to reach out for help, and to break down those barriers to stigma so that no one suffers alone. So all that to say, this particular topic that is, of course, very near and dear to my heart then, and I've made it my mission that in any workplace that I find myself, to make sure that we have a very strong and robust mental health and wellness campaign in place. And in fact, the other day, a couple of managers said to me, you know what, Mauricette, like, there's so much on mental health and wellness, like it's great, we've got it. And I said, wow, great, I've done my job. And have I ever told you about my mom? So I just, I'm going to continue on that mission, and I think we can't actually talk enough about it. So with that, I just want to, please reiterate, the NMC is here to support you. And actually, I believe in the comments section, we have the email address and the Twitter handle as well. So please do not hesitate to reach out. We're happy to assist at any time in any way that we can. Thank you for joining us for this very important conversation. And I hope that it also provides everyone with the information that they need to make sure that they're taking stock of their own mental health and investing in your own self-care, so that we can bring our best selves to work, our best selves to our families, as parents, and as community members. So thank you very much. And with that, Marilyn, I'm going to turn things over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mauricette. Thank you for sharing your authentic story. It is leaders like yourself who put themselves forward and push that envelope and share that mandate that makes a difference and impacts how we all work in our own environments and support our teams. So thank you very much, Mauricette. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure our viewers today appreciate that as well. Again, if you wouldn't mind, folks, please removing yourself from video and muting yourselves, only because it is going to be recorded, and the YouTube video link will then just have all of our faces on there. I'm not sure whether that's something you'd like to do. Thanks very much. At this time, I would like to introduce our invited guest, Jennifer Carter. Jennifer, thank you for coming today and sharing your personal journey with us. I've attended a few of your sessions, and I have to say that every single time, I always learn something new. I'm always blown away by your authenticity and by the tips that you've shared. I know that everyone who listens to your story comes away with some learning that they can put in place. So thank you, Jennifer, and welcome.
Thanks. Just so you know, I may yawn a bit during this morning. I have a cat, an 18-year-old cat, who has a bit of a cold, and in order to remind us to give her pills, I guess, at about 2 in the morning, she'll get on one of our chests and go, ah, in our faces. So we've been up since like 2 with a cat who keeps reminding us to give her pills or something. So if I yawn, it's not personal.
So it's not me, today. Jennifer? It's not me, it's your cat?
That's right, it's the cat. It's a cranky old cat, the old lady.
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, let me officially introduce you then. Jennifer has been a public servant for over 20 years. She's a senior manager for over a decade with the Funding Arrangement Management Expert Directorate at Crown-Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada. She is a certified life coach. She loves cats, as you can tell already with her initial story, enjoys the outdoors. Recently, however, Jennifer has lost her precious Willie Nelson, a cat that she's had for many years. And she'll probably weave a story of Willie into our presentation today. Jennifer comes from Elliott Lake. She still holds the small town values and the philosophy that there's a country song for every situation in life. And that's a life lesson, Jennifer, that I think your dad taught you and that you carry in your heart on a daily basis. And I know that you also asked me to record a few songs for our opening today. And if I wasn't on mute, people would have heard that.
That's all good, as long as you heard them.
Yeah, I heard them, so thank you for that. So Jennifer, I know that when we talk, you often say it's, burnout and our mental health, whenever we start, putting the mirror up to ourselves, we don't always recognize it. We sometimes second guess ourselves. We don't always feel comfortable having that conversation or discussion, which leads me to my very first question, right? Having survived burnout, what were your signs and symptoms, and how did you experience it, and how did you come to know that that was something that you were living through?
Yeah, this is a funny one, and this is probably one of the only 2 or 3 parts that are consistent every time I give a talk. In 2014, I had taken over this boardroom for about 4 or 5 months. I left my open office cubicle and hid out in my boardroom, and I thought everyone else was seeing me functioning normally just in a boardroom, but it turns out that wasn't the case. And one day, my senior advisor, Martin, who's still my senior advisor to this day, so if you look to hire one of us, you have to take both of us because we're just codependent at this point. He said to me, he came in the boardroom and he said, Jennifer, he said, you go to your doctor right now, I'm going to drag you there by all your hairs. And another colleague drove me to my doctor, and I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder, of all things. So, at the time I was like, this is silly, like I'll be fine, just give it 2 more weeks, I'll be fine. And turns out I wasn't fine. And when I look back now and my therapist would say, so what do you see were your changes? What was going on? And I'm like, well, I was swearing more than I usually do. And it's that's kind of not me. I was not showering often, which I'm surprised no one else noticed earlier, to be honest with you. Or maybe they did and they just thought that was perfume. I like to wear stiletto heels. It's one of my things, and I stopped wearing them. I was wearing sock feet around the office, which is not like me. I hate socks. And at home, my energy was weird because I wouldn't sleep, but I'd go to the gym, and I'd go to the gym for 2 or 3 hours, and I had lost a lot of weight. And people really love to compliment you when you've lost a lot of weight. So I actually felt like maybe I looked good and I sounded good. But if you actually talk to my staff or the people around me, my friends, my mom or my dad at the time, I wasn't laughing. I wasn't joking around about stuff. I wasn't laughing at myself. Whenever I'd talk, it was only about work. It was just frustration about work. I was living alone at the time with the cats, and I'd have a nice big glass of port before bed, which isn't like me because 1, I have better taste than port, but 2, that's just not normal. And it was so that I could sleep for an hour or maybe 2 hours. That was it. These were things that other people didn't see, and the stuff they saw was at work, when I'd be talking about having too much to drink, or when I'd be talking about, how I spent 3 hours at the gym this morning starting at 4 a.m. and I'm so wired now. And, I'd talk about how, I worked until 11 p.m. and came back at 3 in the morning to get some more work done or whatever. People would hear this and they'd see me looking not like myself. Port can be lovely, but not when you're losing your mind. I ruined it for myself, unfortunately, but that's okay. I can still have a little glass of red sometimes. But it's funny when a lot of these articles about burnout say watch for yourself and watch for these things. And I can tell you, I didn't see those things, but everyone else around me did. And the only person who was able to come in and actually tell me there was something wrong was someone I trusted implicitly. And I'm very glad that he did that. As I say this, some people say to us that we're too close, and we aren't. We don't even live in the same town, and quite honestly, we're good that way. But, when someone literally saves your life, you do actually become quite close to them, and I think that that's valid. But it's always interesting to kind of think about, the signs and symptoms, which I didn't see at all until long after I was well-ish.
Yeah, you're raising a super valid point. And back when I was in the EAP counseling role, I found that colleagues had a huge impact on supporting our mental health because we either second guessed ourselves or we refused to acknowledge it. Because when you put the mirror up and you start staring at yourself in that mirror, you're afraid of what you're going to see, so you kind of keep it outside of your frame. So, as managers, we need to support our employees, the ones that, we haven't, and it involves having an ongoing relationship with, right, Jennifer? It's not like someone that you didn't know came up to you and said, oh, by the way, I'm noticing something. The impact there won't be as,
That's right.
as impactful, right, as someone
Yeah.
who you've had a valued relationship, you've had conversations, you've built trust, right?
Well,
So,
and in fact, and sometimes it can be more damaging. And it's not a reflection on the person themselves. If my DG at the time had come into that boardroom and said to me, Jen, here's a sick leave note, you've got to go, you're not well, I would have pushed back just out of my own ego, my own need to look like I was strong, and my own not seeing how bad things were really, really bad. And I couldn't see it. So the right thing to do was the wrong thing to do was let it sit for over a month where I was doing this. That was wrong on the workplace. But the right thing to do was somebody who I would trust and who I know wouldn't try to stick me or try to make me look bad or anything else, come in and say, this isn't good, like you haven't eaten in days, you've used 6 boxes of Kleenex in 2 days, like you're not answering the phone. That was the right thing, is to have someone that I trusted and who trusted me and who could actually be honest with me without me also going home and going, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. No.
yeah.
I still owe him my life, even though he drives me nuts to this day.
Right, and I'm glad that you had someone look out for you, and I think, excuse me, all of us have that responsibility with our teammates and our teams, right? It's just human caring, human kindness, and that's what he showed towards you, right? He didn't come in an aggressive way, he didn't come in an attacking way, he came from a place of kindness.
Yeah.
Right? Kindness is better. Isn't that the saying?
Yep.
So, burnout, according to the Canadian Mental Health Association, or, according to the Mayo Clinic, it's not really a medical diagnosis, right? They don't medically diagnose it. They just say it's, this lack of energy, this exhaustion that you feel, this ongoing feeling. So sometimes it's very difficult to recognize that versus anxiety and depression. So what do you think might be ways to recognize that makes, how can
Oh,
we
yeah.
differentiate?
I think some of us are predisposed to a burnout with that. I mean, if I look back in my time, um, and I think about all the things I was terrified of for so long, and it wasn't real terror, it was full anxiety. So I already had some stuff around me that was going to be something that would predispose me to being a workaholic or something else. But I think, now burnout is being recognized more and more in the DTSM and other places about being actually something medical. But what they do is they link it to PTSD, which is why I couldn't understand why they kept saying I had PTSD. I'm like, I live with cats in a nice little condo. I have friends. I have a safe job. Like, but it was just, as the psychiatrist told me, he said, everyone has their war, and it might be a bad divorce. It might be, some trauma in their lives. It's actually, a house burning down or something else that can cause you trauma. It can also just be a hard time, whatever it is, at work, somewhere else, where high levels of stress, and it's all about how your brain reacts. And there's a TED Talks out there by Dr. Jerry Pulio, and what she did was she had a burnout and she wanted to figure out why she had one. And what she did was and what the symptoms were, and the trajectory of recovery, and also the likelihood of having it again. And what she does is map it very closely to organizational change and the people in it, on those changes, how we actually are parts of that, and control we have, and so on. But what you see is burnout and PTSD are very much on the same trajectory, the same kind of causes, and the same kind of recovery, the same treatment, and the same likelihood if you're put in the same situation of falling down again. So it's nice to hear people talk about it, because I know that even mental health advocates in the past, I've had to react, which I rarely do. I usually just put pictures of cats on Twitter, or baseball stuff. But I've had to react when people say, "Oh, it was just burnout," and I'm like, "Whoa up, no, you didn't need just a weekend or one night of mindful work or a holiday. You needed actually medical treatment to get through that recovery." And it's a lifelong process, I can tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember in a lot of the training that we did in mental health, it doesn't go away. Like the symptoms are manageable, we go back to our functioning selves, but there's always, like a low running current that's within you that can be sort of sparked at any time based on what's happening in your life, right? And do we want it to go away? I mean, it's who we are, right?
Yep.
And it's part of an acceptance of who we are, and it's part of others accepting all of our imperfections because, not one of us is perfect. You're a great example of courage, Jennifer. That was the latest. Thank you.
Well,
You
thanks.
know what?
But I would
Thank you
actually,
for saying that. That's wonderful. And I agree. 100 times over. Jennifer, I wanted
I
to
think
say,
everybody who makes changes in their lives are the brave ones. Anybody who makes a good change in their life or in their own personalities to work on it, that's where the courage comes in, because that's hard to do. And some people will never face that.
yeah, the courage to recognize, right? And
Yep.
take and
And work.
and having supports around you. I like how you said burnout is connected to PTSD. That's great learning because that's not obvious, right?
Yeah. And trauma, I mean, I'm in trauma therapy for burnout. And that's what's actually encouraged is specialized in trauma in order to get through a severe burnout.
Yeah, interesting. Question number 3. Que sont les leçons apprises? So, Jennifer, what were the lessons learned that can support managers listening today?
Oh, there's a few. I have a whole bunch of notes because I'm doing a talk tomorrow. So I don't know if you can read them. I sure can't. Oh well, I think there's a few things that I like to talk about, and one of them actually, I was talking about it this morning at my management meeting with my DG and the fellow directors about, um, you know, transitioning back to work or whatever. And I said, it's funny because I was reading an article in Harvard that says to help the transition better when you're working from home, if you find the stress with bringing work home, which is what we're all doing more or less, um, you might want to make work more like the office or home more like the office. And I was like, okay, so my husband about 10:30 in the morning cooks fish in the microwave, and we don't clean it. I make sure that the kids leave hair and everything in the bathroom. I make sure that I send myself weekly emails about the bed bug situation in my building at work. And it's like, this isn't something. No, I don't want to make it into work. My home isn't at work, so I've got to figure out a new balance, and this is hard. In my workplace, I had figured that out a little bit. I was better with my boundary setting and so on. But then when I'm at home, the first few months, like lots of us do, we're like, well, I guess I'm expected to work a little more because I don't have my hour-long commute. Perfect. So I'll log in at 7 instead of drive. And I'll stay online until 5 because I'm not driving. And, I'm here. I may as well work through lunch. And these are things I've had to really be careful with because I did have kind of a fall back in November. I fell right back and I was very nervous. Thankfully, I'm married now to a husband who also has depression and anxiety. So we keep watching each other. Um, well, one thing that I had to recognize when I was in treatment was that we have funny paradigms in the public service and in most workplaces, and you see it in writing in Harvard and all these things. And one of them is this wonderful world of productivity. And I know Marilyn and others have heard me talk about this. I can talk about it forever. But I think there's the word productivity that means to us the amount of paperwork that we get done in a day. And if we're not as productive, then maybe we need to work late. We need to be more productive, more productive. And one of the hardest things for me to face when I first went on leave was that I wasn't being quote unquote productive because I couldn't actually read when I first went on leave. I couldn't think. So I'd lie on the couch and stare at nothing. Or I'd sleep all the time suddenly because I hadn't slept in months, or I'd just sit with the cats and pet them and do nothing. And it got me thinking. This goes back to my philosophy about there's a country music song for every situation in life, and that there is a country music song for my new view of productivity, and it's one of my favorite songs, and it's called Still Moving, and it's by Willie Nelson, of course. um, and uh, and Willie Nelson, he sings about, still moving to me, and I swim like a fish in the sea all the time, but if that's what it takes to be free, I don't mind, but still moving. And I can be moving and I can be still, but still moving. And what that kind of meant to me, and I worked in this in therapy, of course, because at first I thought he was nuts to be able to tell me to sit and do nothing. Meanwhile, I'm the one that's nuts. It's on my paperwork in HR. But I said, it's sometimes sitting and staring at nothing is actually so good for my brain so that I can actually have a difficult conversation with somebody later. Or I can have a better sleep, or tomorrow I can actually do more work because now my brain is slowed again. And for some people, that's going for a run. My husband likes to meditate. I think that's cool. I can't do that. My thing is gardening, and right now it's working out in the garage and stuff, doing stuff. But it's a different kind of productivity than we're used to. And sometimes I do have to take a day off from working from home to be productive in a different way so that I'm more productive later. Um, another thing that I learned, and I still do it, and I have to force myself sometimes, is asking for help. And it's something that we always say, right? Oh, I'm going to ask for help. When I was burning out, one of my biggest problems was I thought I could actually handle everything. And my staff all had families. They had, children. They had relationship issues going through. I was single with cats. I'm good. I can do this. I had no health issues at the time. I didn't think. And so I just stay late. I do all the work. I'd pick it up, pick it up, pick it up because I figured they couldn't. I wanted to save them from it. Turns out they wanted to be relied on more. They like being asked to take on a bit of different responsibility or learn something new. And I wasn't saving them from it because what ended up was I was off and then they were thrown into it at, Mach 10 into the fire. And that doesn't help anybody. So I had to really learn how to step back and say, okay, you know what, I could do this, or I could go to this meeting and I can let one of my guys go and learn something new and report back. And then we decide, and it's actually pretty cool. People are, I find, stepping up more. They're actually asking to do stuff. And in my personal life, my dad died last January, and my mom up in Elliott Lakes left on her own. And one of her biggest problems was actually asking people for help, asking them for stuff, asking to take her to the grocery store or whatever. And she and I had a long talk the last time I saw her, which was before the COVID stuff. And talking to her about how I had learned to ask people for help, to ask for a ride to the grocery store because I couldn't drive today, or whatever it was, asking for that help. And it's such a freeing thing, but it's also, we always like to help everyone else, so why don't we actually expect that they would want to help too? It's again, without thinking, oh, I'm a egoist and this is my big. It's not that. It's that we're human and we want to help everybody else, but we forget that other people want that too. One thing that I've tried to do a lot in the workplace is try to change people's use of some words. And this is something that is near to me because I hear people say things like, oh my God, I'm so depressed. It's been a hard day. And, oh my God, I could kill myself today. These are all things that I was actually trying to do or that I was feeling so deeply that I couldn't function. And I'm not alone. I know that. And so I held a workshop at work just for fun. I just held it. And some people came and we talked about different words for using the phrase depressed or anxious or bipolar. People like to use that too. Oh, that ADM is so bipolar, I don't know how to predict anything. Well, that's not what that is. So, people actually live with these things and we should be educated in that. And I think that's something we should all still be working on, is correcting our own language and other people's language too. Words matter, exactly. Words do matter, and they mean something. I have in my signature block for work, and I stole it off Twitter, possibly from one of you guys, so don't take it personally. It's actually a good thing, is that I do balance time. So I work usually 7:15-ish till 3:15-ish, and I'm always a bit flexible, but I put that in my signature block about, this is my work hours may not reflect yours, and that's okay. Because I want my guys who all work different hours too to remember that just because I email them at 7 doesn't mean I expect them to reply at 7:05. If their usual work hours are 10 to 6, I'm good. So it's a good balance too.
That ties into your initial point on boundaries, right? That since the pandemic, because we don't feel like we need to commute, that we work more. That should not be the case. And I think on the chat line, there were several folks who said, "Oh yeah, that happens to me, right? Well, I'm usually commuting at this time, so I might as well start work." And
that's right.
And so you're right. We need to adhere to those boundaries and step away because it could lead to more stress and a potential burnout, right?
Yeah, and we as managers have a responsibility to help our staff know that too. So I see a lot of people everywhere say, right on Twitter and other places, now that we're expected to work more because we're at home, I'm like, but are we really? Like, is that just something we think? Or is that something that's explicit from management? Because in which case I want to know what that is and where those people are. But I think those are things we have to remind our staff too, that they're allowed to also have their boundaries. We were talking today in management meeting about how no one wants to take vacation because they have nowhere to go. I'm like, I literally have my backyard to go. I have, I can sit in my kitchen and cook if I'm off. You're still going to take vacation and sick leave. We still have to encourage that from our people around us and make it okay for them to do it. And sometimes that's by setting the example.
Yes, and also a good point, right? We often say, should we be taking vacation? Like, what for? Nothing to do. But rest
Yeah.
is still something.
Yeah.
And taking a break and stopping and doing nothing, even if it's just for a minute, is restful in itself, right? So
One thing I
the
like
other
to do with my staff, and you know this, Marilyn, you know this because I've done it before with you on the line. I like to send them funny little activities to do for half an hour around lunch. And it not to take away from lunch, I always tell them, eat lunch before or after, but then you have a half an hour to do X. And sometimes it's, I want you to find your last favorite picture of your family or your kids or whomever. Some people, it's one time I actually wrote to them and I said, you have a half an hour. I want you to listen to music and at whatever kind of music, whatever kind of volume you want for half an hour and tell me how you feel. And we learned one of my staff actually records music on YouTube in his home language. He's from Djibouti. And so it's this cool kind of reggae sounding stuff and it's pretty neat. And we also learned that one of my staff, former now, because she had to be fired because she listened to Rick Astley. So it was unfortunate. She was cool, but sorry. No, I'm kidding. So it was kind of a fun little, and it got people thinking, and again, it doesn't heal anything, but it can switch your brain for a second. So like even right now, you could think about a song that's currently in your head and, and what that would look like and what kind of feeling you get,
Yeah, and if the manager's giving you permission, then folks feel a little bit more open to saying, well, I mean, it's okay. I've been told that it's okay. Sometimes folks need to hear that,
Yeah.
right? That it's not going to be assumed. So that's a practice in itself, right, of how you can support your employees. A couple of weeks ago, I shared with the NMC steering committee that one of the practices that worked that I thought was really effective is two things. One, declare one day of the week as a no meeting day. So
Yep.
that day of the week, there's no Zoom calls, there's no meetings. It's just going to be that day we're going to catch up on the email, respond to things that are outstanding, research, prepare, deliver, analyze. That one day where you're not going to be bombarded with interruption. That's going to, because every interruption is a stop.
Yeah.
And then you have
Yeah.
to start again, right? It's like
Yeah.
changing gears, and that takes mental effort. And if you do that several times a day, people will say, I'm so tired, but what did I do? Well, you stopped and started 5 times. And that
Yeah.
switching of gears is impactful, right? So that was one thing, no meetings one day a week if possible. And the other one was because we were all in lockdown and, there was a huge majority of folks with young kids at home with no place to go and they're home with their parents
Yep.
to avoid
Absolutely.
scheduling meetings around that whole lunch hour, like from
Yeah.
11:30 to 1 to really avoid that because that's when kids are going to start coming around for food and getting
Yep.
hangry about things, and so being more respectful. So I thought those two were really great practices. And if we practice from that perspective and being mindful from that perspective, I think it's very supportive to our
Yep.
staff, right, and to our employees.
And actually,
Yeah.
somebody just mentioned sense of humor, and that one's important because I do laugh a lot. I love to laugh. I laugh at myself a lot. One thing that we have to remember is we don't laugh at other people, and we don't mock things like depression or having a bad day or whatever. We wouldn't think about doing that to somebody who has a child who's sick. We wouldn't make fun of them and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe." We wouldn't do that. It's unconscionable. But
Yeah.
there are lots of people who like to joke about, oh, Jen's having another bad day, she's off. Okay, that's cool, but that's not true. Or Jen's on vacation again. She needed another vacation. I'll tell you, my first vacation of 2 years in Vanier wasn't cool, so no. I think that that's something we have to remember is using humor is important for yourself, but you really have to know who you're talking to if you're ever going to use that on someone else, especially when it comes to health issues or personal issues.
Yeah, it's condescending.
Yeah, it can come off very hurtful, and it can also come off like a stigma. Yeah.
Yeah, it's condescending, and it doesn't validate the person's experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Self-care. How do we, for folks who are perhaps recovering from a mental health scenario, recovering from a burnout, how do we ensure our self-care keeps us in check so that we don't re-trigger or reignite our situation?
Well, and that's a hard one, right? That's a really hard one because everyone's got their own personal ways of doing things. And for me, one thing I've had to do is get crystal clear when I'm at the end of my rope or when I know that I'm edging near a tough time. Last Friday, I had a call, I think with you guys, and then I called my boss and I said, I haven't slept in 3 nights and this is dangerous. So I'm going to take this afternoon off and I'm going to sleep. And one thing I don't do is apologize for that. And he doesn't expect it. I'm very lucky. I have a very good DG, and as I told him, he can't retire till I do. But a lot of it is that we have to be able to say, instead of saying things like, I'm really sorry, I have to go home, or I have a headache, or, you know what, I'm working from home, so I may as well just log in and do stuff. No, we're allowed to still take a sick day. We're allowed to take vacation. We're allowed to take appointment leave or kid leave for stuff we have to do. We're also allowed to just take a day and not tell anyone what we're doing. There's no such thing as mental health leave. I really hate that. When people say I'm taking mental health leave, you're taking sick leave because you're sick. That's the way it is. And if you're sick for 2 hours or not, or 5 days, it doesn't matter. We have those benefits. We have that, and we are very lucky to have that. I don't like people saying, why are you depressed? You have a great job. And, yeah, okay, that's all fine and dandy, but that's a medical thing, totally separate. But at the same time, there are things we need to be grateful for, and that is that we have access to services people don't. Most people don't. We have access to our union contracts and so on, where we can actually say, sorry, this is my work, and this is my work hours. We can actually take some harder lines that way when needed. But we also do have sick leave and appointment leave and other things we can take when we need to. And we should be taking them, take advantage of them, because most of us probably grew up with parents who didn't have that. I sure did. And it's very important to remember those things. But it's also important to just do check-ins with each other and with people that you know. And when you know someone's switching a bit, maybe not sounding the same, you might want to check on them a little harder. I sometimes tell my boss, like, feel free to check. If I suddenly change, or I'm swearing more, I'm being weirder in a different way, feel free to ask me what's going on. And I'll do that with my staff too. And it's not a matter of sticking your nose in my business. It's just making sure things are okay, because I may not see what you're seeing. And but at the same time, we owe it to ourselves to watch TV for half an hour or whatever, and work however we need to. We're lucky that way too, to be able to remote work. So for me, a lot of it's about making sure that I know where my triggers are, and making sure that when I'm hitting one of them, or I know that something's coming up, that I get support right away before I end up in a bad place again.
Okay. So greater sense of self-awareness, right? So
and call on the resources. You have good therapists. They're free. Yeah. There are free clinics out there now too. In Ottawa, we have lots of them. I know in Toronto they do too. Free counseling clinics. There's phone numbers. I've used a stress center more than once. I used to say, I wish I wasn't single at the time, because someone might have seen it. But having talked to more and more colleagues who've burned out or who've had other mental health issues, that's not necessarily the case. I'm lucky now to have Keith here, who understands this as well. But it's you're not always going to have that support at home either. So you have to make sure that you're getting that support somewhere.
Yes, thank you. So we're going to open it up for questions in a minute, but before we do, just one last question, and you kind of touched a little bit on that. Resources. What were some great resources, whether it's a book, a workbook, a website, something that you used that you thought that was very helpful and you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, first, I did find, I got very lucky to get in with a trauma therapist who helped me at least understand where I was, learn to sleep again. He's still on call for me anytime. But I do believe in therapy, and I do believe in getting that kind of support. I did end up on medication eventually. I had refused for a while, and then I attempted a return, and it was a disaster. And I decided that maybe it was time to have that complementary. Not everybody needs that. Some people do. There's nothing wrong with it. And I would rather be on that medication than not and be like I was before, because it was not pretty. I probably wouldn't be here. Best case, I'd be in my mom's basement in Lake Lake. But I think, that we have people at home we can ask for help. People want to know that they can help. We all have some best friends somewhere, whether they be online, next door, in your house, whatever. Hopefully not like creepy in your house, like they're welcomed in your house. But, we have to be able to, we have sometimes our parents, we can still call them, or even our kids. Some people have that as a network. You have to make sure, that they know too, that there might be some downfalls and might be some struggles, and they can help you through that. In terms of books, one of my favorites of all time, I don't know, many people here have read it, I'm sure of it, because she's very well known. And it's more of a humor book, but it's very self-reflection based. And it's called Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson. And I'll tell you, I gave it to my mom after I read it. I had to warn her there are swears in it. But she called and she was crying, and she said, I didn't know social anxiety was actually a thing. Because she, for her whole life, she was a teacher, an amazing teacher, but she was terrified of social things. She was terrified of everything. She'd throw up before she taught a class until she retired. And she suddenly realized this was real. And that book actually makes you realize that there's a lot of these things we think are unique to us and we're weird for it. But then when you actually tell someone else, like a friend or someone, they go, yeah, me too. And you're like, what? That's weird. And suddenly you have a support group. One of the more serious books is there's two of them. One of them is called, and this one my therapist put on the table, and I pointed at it. I said, I've been telling you this since the beginning. It's called Things May Go Terribly, Horribly Wrong.
Yeah.
I've been telling you that for months. Yeah, Brene Brown has some great books too. Depends on what stage you're in or what kind of thing you're looking for sure. But she's fantastic. But this book too, it goes through. I use them in my coaching stuff at work. Whenever I'm at work with coaching circles, we can actually go through these exercises where they're mostly mindfulness. Some of them are very imaginary. Some of them are very very fun. Some of them are quite serious, but they're very helpful and they still help with the mindfulness stuff. And Another one that's even more serious is the PTSD Workbook, and it has a lot of sections. And again, recognizing that PTSD can be caused from all kinds of different things in our lives. It has questions that actually I answer to myself regularly, or mindfulness things like watch a television show and then explain in writing what it was about. So I actually know I've been paying attention, and not staring randomly at whatever, and not focusing. But some of the questions are things like, how did you show strength during those hard times? How did you show self-preservation, like positive, turning things into a bit of a positive, which is really, really helpful. So there are a lot of good books out there and a lot of good activities, and a lot of them are finding what works for you, because not everything will work for everybody.
Yes. Yes, a lot of discussion on our chat line about Brene Brown. The book that you mentioned is also similar to a children's book, Alexander and the Horrible, No Good, Terrible Day or something, right?
Yep.
Which is, we're going to
Yeah.
sometimes have those days, and that's okay. I don't know if anyone's saw the journal by Michelle Obama. She has a journal, a becoming
Yep.
journal. And I mean, she's not a therapist, and she's not coming from a perspective, I think, of supporting anxiety or depression. But the journal itself asks questions that give you reflection on the simple things in life, the things that we forget that bring us joy, right? So she, some of the things in that journal that I really enjoyed were things like, what are the favorite recipes that your mom taught you?
Yep.
And I mean, all of a sudden you start reflecting.
You don't want those for my mom. It'd be like, here's lumpy gravy. I love her, and if she was here, she'd agree. She's a terrible cook. Anyway, that just gave me flashbacks. Go ahead.
Yeah. So flashbacks to something humorous, right? So and I think that was the point of sort of that journal, which I really appreciate. Little things that really brought us back to the simple things in life that bring us joy. And sometimes we need to take a moment to do that, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Michelle Obama has one as well. That's very interesting and nice for just guidance and stuff. And I actually gave it to my husband last year because he likes to journal.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sorry, who did you say that was?
Michelle Obama.
Yeah. I was referring to the same one, I think. Did I not say that?
Oh, I don't know. Sorry, you went blurry with there for
I
a
said
second.
someone
But yeah,
else.
no, it's sorry.
No, I could have said the wrong name.
We'll blame it on the curly hair. We're thinking the same way as we look today.
Yeah. Yeah, so her book was Becoming, and her journal, I
That's
think,
right.
is also called Becoming.
And
But
it is a very good tool. Yeah.
yeah, I found, so yeah, you use it too. Great.
Yeah.
So we're going to open this up for questioning. Is there lots of discussion in our chat line? So thank you for that. But we do have about 5 minutes or so. If there's anyone that has a question for Jennifer, or a question that they'd like to pose, anyone in our chat line have something they'd like to share? Lots of discussion on self-care, by the way. How we need to take time. I like the comment of the participants who said, she had to move out of her bedroom so that her and her husband could enjoy a good night's rest. Between his snoring and her hot flashes, they needed a bit of a reprieve. And so I think what I love about that comment is it's funny how we can tolerate things for so long and not realize this is not making me well. I need to make a change. So that life lesson right there is perfect. So thank you. Sorry, I did a question just come in?
Somebody did send a question.
Oh, there it was.
Yeah, about the return to work.
How was return to work experience
Yeah.
after your initial leave?
Oh my
Great
gosh.
question.
So I had two return to work. The first one was in 2015, which was an absolute disaster, and it was just because I wasn't able to function. And the second one was in 2016 when I finally returned off of long-term disability. And uh, and the nicest thing that anybody said to me was when I went back in the office, Martin came out and he's this big bear man. He hugged me. My head was in his armpit. It was weird. But he said, he says, "I'm glad to see you here." And then he stopped and he says, "No, I'm just glad to see you." And that was the
Oh,
best thing that anyone said to me because my boss was brand new to me and he was lovely. I was very, very lucky. He shared with me his own experience of having struggles. Um, the hard part was is that nobody wants to actually ask you how you're doing because they're all afraid to hear the answer. So people ask things like, "How was French training?" Which was amazing, as you can tell right now. It was fantastic. I'm actually speaking French and you can't even tell. How was your vacation, Jen? Or you had a good long break, eh? Holy crap. I don't know. I was spending thousands of dollars on therapy, and yeah, that was awesome. Um, I actually had asked my boss then to call people into a room. Most of the people had been there when I had lost my mind, and I say that's how I say it. If you say it, you're in trouble. But when I lost my mind, most people were there, and most of them had not checked in on me. I will say, if anyone's here from the Ontario CIRNAC or ISC office, I had so much support from my regional counterparts in Ontario, Quebec, Alberta. Like it was fabulous. All regions reached out more than people I worked with daily. It was scary, and I was put back in the exact same job, exact same cubicle. Nothing had really changed on the file in 2 years either, so exactly the same. The risk was extremely high for me to lose it again, and I didn't. And I think that's mostly because everybody there, even when they were weird or sometimes unpleasant, I knew that I was welcomed back. And because I was open about what had happened and what went on with my boss, he actually was able to also help me manage. So that was better. But I can tell you, I often say that my boss should be invited to Apex meetings to talk about how to reintegrate people back because he actually did a really good job with me, and I know he's done it a few other times. But most people I know that I talk to are not as successful. So a lot of it's about maintaining your therapy, not thinking you're healed, but also being able to still set a boundary and say, not today, people. If you judge me for it, meh. Yeah, it's a tough one.
nice. Thank you for that question. And I thank you for referring to what your colleague said, because a lot of times that comes up, right? As a colleague who's welcoming someone back, what
Yeah,
can we say to make
yeah.
it a warm comment? So thank you for saying that, Jen.
It popped up in my
Um,
Facebook memories the other day, so that was kind of fun.
yeah,
It's like, oh,
yeah, it's not nice to see you back, just nice to see you, which is nice. I love that.
that's right.
What are the
Yeah.
warning signs we should look out for? So I guess maybe what are one, two, or three things that folks should really take notice of if they're experiencing it?
If somebody is talking about a lot of stress they're undergoing at home, at whatever, if they're trusting you with that, or if you hear it, through other people or in a group, if you hear that repeated, oh my God, I'm going through this separation, let's say, and then my husband's experience really was his dad died and then a separation, and then, like all these things piling on, and everybody just went, okay, well, good luck, good luck. If someone had maybe been paying more attention to that specifically, they might have been able to intervene before he also had a big struggle, personal struggle. So I think a lot of times it's being able to listen, but then also recognize that hi baby, come on up. Recognize my cat, the 18-year-old is just barking at me again. But it's recognizing that you might not also be the solution, so you can go and ask for help somewhere else. But you got to know your people around you. You got to know your colleagues, and you got to be willing to admit that some people are not particularly happy. Like
And
a
one,
lot of it's just watching personalities, people's changes in personalities. If they're doing things like swearing more, working too late all the time for no real reason. Those are things to keep an eye on. Hygiene.
yeah, so if there's
Watch people.
an observable change in behavior and it's going on for a period of time. So it's
Yeah,
not just a couple of days or a good night's sleep and you can shake
that's
it
right.
off. It's where it's been going on now for 2, 3, 4 weeks and it's not
Yeah,
improving. In fact, it might be getting worse.
yeah,
So, and if
yeah.
you feel a change in yourself, right, that your behavior has changed, again, CMHA, the Mayo Clinic, they have all the different signs of burnout, but they'll say, are you becoming more cynical? Are you not feeling proud of your accomplishments? Are just a few examples.
That's
Things
right.
like not feeling as productive, really slow start to getting your day started, you don't have the energy, that constant feeling of exhaustion. And again, and it's not just been a day or two where, again, some good sleep and maybe a day off of work where you can just rest and take care of yourself is going to change that scenario, but that it just goes on and on. So I think those were some things that we talked about at the beginning, and things that I've referred to in the chat line. Someone's mentioning that the name of the book that you first mentioned, I think it was Furiously Happy. Was there another one? I'm not sure if that's what the participant was requesting. I think that was the first book you mentioned, Jen.
There was that one. That's a very, very readable book. It's like memoirs, but not. It's memoirs of a person who has so much self-knowledge about her own mental health issues. She just wants to be open with everyone and make people feel normal. I love that book. We had it actually as the base of our wedding cake. My cousin made our wedding cake, and the base of it was that book, because it was like that's what Keith and I both spoke to us of, like, yeah, we're normal too,
So we're at the end of our presentation, although that final question is excellent. Do you find it harder working remotely to take a day away than when you were in the office? Do you think you can sort of respond in a minute or so with that, Jen?
Yeah, it is harder, and it's harder to explain it. I even had a comment once when I said I'm going to be taking, a day off tomorrow. I'm just not feeling good. I'm at a tough time. And, the response was, that's great, but if you feel like logging in later, go ahead. Like, that's literally not it. But I have to hold my ground, and I have to hold myself to it. And sometimes it means I also have to tell one of my staff, you're me today. So when I log in, you remind me you're me, not me. And I have to actually set boundaries by having other people hold me to them, which is okay. And sometimes it's going to be my husband telling me, Jen, what are you doing? Get off that, or eat lunch. And I think that's just, again, part of taking care of ourselves and people, but we have to sometimes be firm on ourselves. And it's not easy. We're the worst. I hate managing myself. I'm awful. I ask too many questions. I'm grumpy. I don't like doing things on time. I'm the worst. I hate working with myself. But I also will then take a rest and I'm okay again.
Yes, exactly.
I just want to point out too, if anyone wants to email me separately outside of this, you can too. I'm always happy to chat about things that aren't G's and C's. And I'm also happy to talk about G's and C's, but a little too happy, so nobody wants that. But feel free to email me anytime, either just to vent or chat or ask questions or share your experience, so I learn something new too. It'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. And we can share your Twitter handle if you'd like, if that's another way people like to reach out.
Sure.
So at this point, sad for me actually, because I'm loving this conversation. I think this is one of the very few times where I get to explore authentically and honestly the topic of mental health, which is near and dear to my heart. A topic that, when I started with the government, that's the job that I first had, was working with an EAP and helping support mental health in the workplace. So thank you so very, very much for your authentic presentation. Everyone today, I'm sure, is leaving with a lesson learned, a tip, a best practice, a resource. And if we can help, the 150 that were here today, and then they can go out and help their teams, and we have this ripple effect.
It starts in your own little world. Yeah.
Right. If we're that pebble and we started that, then I feel that we're accomplishing something with the national managers community and within our chat today.
Yeah.
Thank you also to Mauricette for her candid story and talking about as a child living with a parent experiencing mental health. Many of us, I'm sure, have that similar experience, and probably as children were baffled to understand what that was all about and how that impacted them, and how that makes us more aware and sensitive as adults. So thank you, Mauricette, for sharing. That's wonderful. Thank you, NMC Tech team, for all your support on this. Really appreciate spotlighting, muting, making sure that we have music and that we're being recorded for our YouTube video link. And reach out to us anytime. Feel free to reach out to me or the NMC via Twitter, LinkedIn, for more discussion and more topics. I will be forwarding everyone an evaluation later on this week, along with some resources that Jennifer has mentioned, and the YouTube video. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks, Jennifer.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.